my pleasure to introduce our guest, our speaker today.
It has to be set up for the recording.
Okay, so I see the recording is on. Here we go. Okay.
Dies.
Okay, so Rebbetzin Liat Mayerfeld is a popular and sought-after international speaker. She has been brought to speak in seminars in Spain, Poland, Israel, Denmark, Germany, and Australia, and also teaches for Seriously Sold, an online seminary that opened during COVID, since students couldn't go to Israel. Currently, Rebbetzin Mayerfeld is the co-director of, I hope I say this right, Key, an outreach organization engaging unaffiliated young professionals in New York City. Born in New York and raised in Israel, Liat spent over 2 years working for Israeli military intelligence. She holds teaching qualification and degrees in Jewish studies and special needs education from Megillas College, Jerusalem. Rebbetzin Mayerfeld has worked and taught for Aish in England and New York City. While teaching and educating, she is completing her master's in Jewish education. Liat and her husband have 8 children, 3 of whom are married, and 2 gorgeous grandchildren. She is a superb hostess with an open door policy, together with her husband, Rabbi Moshe, and they have welcomed thousands to their Shabbos, Chagim, and random weekday dinners. Rebbetzin Mayerfeld's educational focus explores the depth and relevance of Jewish texts. She enjoys teaching a wide range of audiences, from training yeshiva teachers to introducing unaffiliated Jews of all ages to the beauty of Judaism in the 21st century. An academic who loves to learn and read, her wisdom and keen insight into people, combined with her ability to distill deep ideas into tangible and relevant life lessons, makes her a superb educator. And today she's going to be speaking to us on deep spiritual connections of Megillas, Rus, and Shavuos. So looking forward.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. It's really just an honor, a privilege to be here. It's incredible to see so many women connecting in tefillah and Torah. Just really, really incredible, very beautiful. So I want to look today at the connection of the Megillah to Shavuos. We see so many different themes work their way through the Megillah that really connect us to Kabbalah Torah. I want to look specifically at love and leadership, and really the deep interconnections that are there. So, everyone can be a good person. People say, what are you trying to do in this world? They're trying to be a good person. But Torah is not about being a good person. Torah is about being a great person. Torah comes to bring it up a notch, right? Go get them, go beyond, dream, achieve. And this story of the Megillah is very real, because no one is infallible. People fall, and some don't rise, but many of them do rise up. And we always say, if you want to see yourself, you look in a mirror, and the mirror today is the Megillah of Rus. She is the mirror. She forces everyone to look at themselves and to push themselves beyond their perceived boundaries. And we see that all of this happens, the love, the leadership, the connection, it happens in crisis, not when things are smooth sailing. When times are tough, do you look inwards and crumble, or do you look outwards and connect and push yourself to be great? Do you only self-preserve, or do you step up to lift other people? It's a journey from the very beginning. People are in constant movement, and we're going to travel with them. So we go back in time. It's 1100 BCE, so over 3,000 years. And the story starts by giving us a baseline, the story point. And what's amazing is the author of the Megillah tells us what's happening with saying very few words, almost without saying any words at all. So it starts by Hi bimei shvot hashoftim. It's the days of the judges, right? And that time is notorious because Isha yashar be'einav yaseh. Every person does what's right in their own eyes, and that's not a good thing. Everyone is self-centered. There's chaos, and we see a famine. In the Torah, whenever Hashem sends famines, there are 10 major famines, it's because Hashem is pressing a reset button, right? There's hard times, and Hashem wants to start from the beginning. But it's easy to crash in that famine, to not rise up, as we said. And we see a man leaves Beit Lechem for Moab. He leaves a house of bread, Beit Lechem, to a place of stingy people, Moab. And we think, okay, so somebody left. What's the big deal? But no, the Megillah tells us this isn't just a loser, selfish person, right? A random person. This is Elimelech. His name means Hashem is king. There's a potential for greatness. He's a leader. So what happened? The Midrash tells us that people were knocking on his door because they wanted food, and he got overwhelmed. Who to give to, how much to give to each person, and he shuts down. He shuts down and he closes up and he leaves town to a place where he doesn't have to give it all. And Elimelech dies there in Moab. He missed this opportunity to give tzedakah. He goes to Moab, and his sons get caught up in what their father started. They marry Moabite women, and they also both die. And so we see extreme examples of people who fell so low that they couldn't get up. But the Megillah doesn't harp on them because we don't judge them, but we also can't learn from them. So we move on to Naomi. And we see that in the beginning, Naomi, she's very interesting because in the beginning, she's very passive. She follows Elimelech, right? And she stays even when, in theory, she could go back, right? When the famine is over. And I think we see people like this who seem like Naomi to be very holy, right? And they say, it's Bashert, it has to be, Hashem is in charge, right? I will do it, whatever, everything's a sign, right? And it's a start. It's better than Elimelech, who says Hashem's not in the picture at all, right? But it's not an ideal Naomi in the beginning, because there's no action of herself. And we see that when the famine is over, she starts. She says, I'm going back home. And the two sisters, as we know, Ruth and Naomi, they go back with her, start to go back with her. And Orpah turns back. We don't have time to look at Orpah's story, but Ruth gives a famous speech, where you will go, I will go, where you will sleep, I will sleep. And the Midrash tells us that Ruth is saying to Naomi, from now on, we are going to be making conscious decisions within a framework of Torah, but the key to greatness, right? The key to greatness is this framework, the laws, the guidelines. Every country has them, right? Fashion, whether it's fashion, architecture, there's always going to be rules. And within that, you create greatness. And Ruth pushes Naomi, and she says, this is why we are going. Hashem, Elokaich Elokai, because Hashem is in charge, right? But she says to Naomi, the relationship with Hashem can be controlling, and it can take over your identity as it did to you, or it can be guiding towards action. And all relationships are like that, right? The key to helping someone be great is to show them the guidelines and then let them soar, right? The relationship with Hashem, this one of greatness, is we see from Ruth both intellectual and emotional. The intellectual one is her words, right? Where she makes a conscious decision to convert. Your God, Elokai, Elokai, your God is my God. I accept Hashem, Amech Ami. I accept all the laws that the people are guided by. Kasher Tilchi Elech, wherever you will go, I will go. I am ready to do what needs to be done. And the Midrash describes exactly which halachot exactly Ruth is talking about, but we definitely see that this is her Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shamayim. She accepts Torah rationally, okay, in her mind. This is a conscious decision. But a relationship with Hashem, it's not enough for it to just be intellectual. It has to be an emotional one, right? There has to be the lev, the avodah shebalev, the heart. And we see that Ruth has that also. And we see it in the way that she connects with Naomi, especially compared to her sister. Orpah kisses Ruth and turns away. And Ruth hugs her, right? See, Ruth hugs Naomi. And in that moment, that hug is her emotional connection, where she's saying, this is where I want to be emotionally. So we see that Rus, she's not seized by an urge. It's not it's not a sudden decision of like, this is what I'm going to do compared to something else. She's not seized by this urge. She seizes the moment, right? And she's not overwhelmed. She masters the circumstances. She is, again, not the one to be helplessly captivated in a situation. She is active. And in her action, she's not merely touched by ruchnias. She forever converts. And the Midrash says to us, here we see a tangible expression of Atem hadvekim ba'Hashem Elokechem chaim kulchem hayom. Anybody who has this dvekut, this connection, this glue, almost in modern Hebrew, devek is glue, chaim kulchem hayom, that is real life, right? Rus here seizes the opportunity to connect to Hashem in the most beautiful, emotional way. And so it's actually beautiful. We speak about, if we're talking about Shavuot, so one of the names of Shavuos is Zman Matan Toratenu. And we say that really each person is going to try to have this same connection as Rus had, this Kabbalat Malchut Shabayim, to accept Torah upon us in the same way that Rus does, right? And we say the reason that we read Rus is just like she was a convert, so too we are all converts. We are all accepting Torah anew, the same way that she did. And we see a practical application of this actually in the brachos that we say every morning, and Birchas HaTorah. So we have two different Birchos HaTorah. The first one, Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu, right? That first one is for the fact that we can learn Torah, that we have Torah, and we can learn it every day. And then we say again, Asher bachar banu mikol amim, the second bracha that Hashem has chosen us, Baruch atah Hashem noten haTorah, and this is Hashem giving the Torah every single morning. So every single morning, we're really accepting upon ourselves the Torah anew. Zman Matan Toraseinu, we're going to celebrate it in big on Shavuos, but we celebrate it every single day. Every single day, we have this opportunity to be Atem Hadvekim b'Hashem, to cling to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and to have Chaim Kulchem Hayom, to have real life every single day. And so, and when Ruth hugs Naomi like this, this is her first appearance as Naomi's mirror, so to speak. She says to Naomi, she says to us, look at yourself and take ownership of your actions. Hashem gave you legs and arms, a brain, not to just give over control to him, but to appreciate and to use. So that is the beginning, the introduction to Rus and to Shavuos. So Rus and Naomi arrive in Beit Lechem, and there's a harvest. And obviously they have nothing. They've just arrived, and they're stuck. So Rus says, I'm going to provide, right? She's going out to glean in the fields. One of the three mitzvos that a field older has for poor people, and it's for the poorest of the poorest people. They don't have a way to come and collect a corner of a field. They don't have the strength to collect a big what's it called? It's not called a piece of wheat. They're collecting, it's the poorest of the poor. They're collecting individual grains of harvest that fall out of the harvester's hands. And the Megillah says, Vatikar, it happened. It was just a coincidence that she arrives in this field. And we see here and later in the story and anywhere in the Torah, whenever it tells us it's a coincidence, it is anything but a coincidence, right? Because we act and Hashem acts. We create a reality together. And when a coincidence is really Hashem's sending us an opportunity, and we have to grab it. Otherwise, we're like, you know the famous joke about the man who's on a desert island and he says, Hashem, save me, save me. And he sees a helicopter who calls out to him, come grab the rope, we're going to take you. And he says, no, Hashem's going to save me. And a boat comes, right? And the boat says, the people on the boat says, come with us on the boat. And he says, no, I don't need the boat. Hashem will save me. And he dies. And he goes up to Shemaim and he says, Hashem, I had so much bitachon, like I was sure you were going to save me. What happened? You didn't come. And Hashem says, well, who do you think sent the helicopter and the boat? right? We can act and ignore Hashem, or we can see him everywhere, all the coincidences in our lives. And so enter Boaz. Boaz is a tricky one because also we'll see so much potential and we'll see how, like Naomi, he develops. But he has a great starting point. He greets everybody when he comes in with Hashem's name. That was his chiddush. He brings Hashem into the conversation. Hashem imachem, may Hashem be with you. But we'll see that even though he talks the talk, he doesn't yet walk the walk. He hasn't internalized his own message yet, right? Boaz is like, again, he's like us, right? We say Baruch Hashem all the time. And it's like second nature, right? How are you? Baruch Hashem. How are the kids? Baruch Hashem. How are you feeling? Baruch Hashem. How was your day? Baruch Hashem. We are like Boaz, constantly Baruch Hasheming, right? But what does that mean? Have we internalized that? We see that Boaz didn't. Boaz didn't internalize it. We know, for example, that Boaz makes great feasts constantly to celebrate and thank Hashem for his accomplishments, but he's very discerning in who he invites. He only invites the people who he thinks will be beneficial for his future, right? How he envisions his future. So, and so his vision is of himself, not really of Hashem in the big picture. And we're going to see how Rus again teaches him how to make that real, how to make his Baruch Hashem's real, to actualize them. So we'll see how it develops, right? So for example, we see right away how it starts with Rus, right? When he sees her and he says to her, "Oh, I know who you are. I'm going to help you," right? And what does he do to help her? He gives her a few pieces of grain, right? A few pieces of grain. And there's a midrash that says to us that really Boaz was worried. What would people think? Oh, it's not really appropriate, right? So he thinks, I'm just going to give her a little bit. And that's really all I need to do, right? He looks at the halachos of tzedakah and he says, this is what I need to do, right? But to be great, you cannot just be halachic. The halacha is just the framework to teach us what to do. It's not enough to say, I kept halacha, I did the right thing, I'm a good person, shkoyach, good for me, amazing, right? We have to be proactive with our kishkas, right? To know what's really right and to do it. And again, so often we're like Boaz, we're in our space, we're doing the right thing, we're safe, we're healthy, right? But as Torah Jews, we have to be great. We need to be expansive. We need to look around. And Rus acts as Boaz's mirror. She goes to Boaz's field and he says to her again, Hashem will pay you back for helping Naomi. Hashem will protect you. And she replies to him, don't speak to me like you speak to the other people, right? She hints to him, you have to be responsible. You have to go out of your way, right? And we learn really what chesed is from Rus, right? The action. How do we take action? How do we be great? Tzedakah comes from tzedek. That is doing the right thing. That's what Boaz did. Chesed is not just doing the right thing. Chesed is when you go beyond, when there's love, because love breaks down anything that's right, that's just standing at the line, right? Love is when you really, really give. And I just have to share with you a very beautiful story. I was once waiting online in a store that was selling ready-made food for Shabbos. And a young girl comes in and she says, my mother said I should buy, the regular. And so the woman who's at the counter starts to fill boxes and boxes and boxes. And then the owner comes up and she sees what she's collected and she says, oh, also take her this. And she brings a few more things. And the girl says, that's, is that part of my regular thing? And the owner says to her, she says, it's not part of your regular thing, but we have a special today. Anybody who buys a certain amount gets even more. And the girl says, oh, that's amazing. I'm so excited. My mother will be so happy. And she hands over for this big bag of really Shabbos food for an entire large family. She hands over $20. And she says, is this enough? And the woman at the counter, she turns to the owner, and the owner says, yes, that's that's perfect, that's enough, right? It was just the most amazing chesed. Obviously, she was not taking $20 worth of food. She was taking hundreds of dollars worth of food. But she gave this girl and her family, right, the kavod of feeling like she was paying for her food, right? At times of, people, we look inward, we protect ourselves. Did this store owner need to give her so much and even more? No. But greatness comes when we feel stable enough to love other people, to give to other people when the little bit in our cup runs over. And that's what Ruth says to Naomi, to Boaz. First of all, she says, you have to act. And we see that when she goes back to Naomi, and Naomi says, where were you? Ruth says to her, today I did a chesed with Boaz. Today I did a chesed with Boaz. Really? Really? You did a chesed with him? And the Gemara answers yes, because more than the homeowner does for the poor person does for the owner. Because the poor person gives us opportunity. And it's our responsibility to recognize that and to say, thank you for coming. Whether it's at the door, at the kosel, right? The kosel is such a great example. We're in the middle of a mitzvah. We're davening. We have so much kavanah, and this woman comes. She's, doesn't pay attention, doesn't notice. She's left. Thank you for coming. Even when I'm busy doing other good things, Rus is the catalyst here for Boaz to say, go beyond what's required of you. Think for yourself, be yourself. Shavuot Chag HaBikurim. We celebrate the harvest. We see Boaz was celebrating the harvest, how much he had, the gifts that Hashem has given him. Chag HaBikurim is much deeper than that. It has to be. It can't be that we have a major yontif just to celebrate crops, right? And the Netivos Shalom, a beautiful Hasidic explanation, he says to us, what are the Bikurim are not the crops. The Bikurim is us. We are the fruits of the tree, right? Our neshamas are the fruit. And we're judged, right? On Rosh Hashanah, we're judged for our physical reality, the opportunities that we're going to have in the physical world. Chag HaBikurim is the judgment of the spiritual opportunities that we will have, the opportunities to develop our neshama, our character, to develop our ruchnius. So that's why there's so much preparation, same as there is for Rosh Hashanah, because we need to focus and think, how do I want the new me to look, the new fruit of my soul? When the opportunities arise, will I savor them? Will I use them? And will I use them with joy, with happiness, with patience? New fruit is bringing our newness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? We are spiritually a new being. We are bringing our own Bikurim. And so too, on Shavuos, we know that when Klal Yisrael was standing around Har Sinai, they heard Hashem's voice. They saw Hashem, they heard Hashem's voice, and everybody dies. Their neshamas leave them. They pass out. It's too much for the ruchnias, for their physical bodies, but they're revived, right? And each of them is like a newborn being, Bikurim, a new fruit. And we are each meant to be like this new fruit in our hearts as individuals. Ruth reinvents her reality, right? At 40, she's not a young. Well, I want to say she's not a young woman, but everything is relative, right? And she teaches Boaz also, right? Be your own fruit. Celebrate your own renewal. Don't just do what is required. So in chapter 1, we have this embracing this personal relationship with Hashem. And in chapter 2, we learn the importance of chesed to develop ourselves and take it one step further with the people that we interact with. We get to chapter 3 and we see that Naomi finally learns from Ruth. Things are picking up, right? And Naomi proactively makes plans, finally, right? Finally, she becomes inspired to work towards the future. And she says to Ruth, the harvest is over. It's time, yalla, for Boaz to act. And Naomi says, we're going to make this happen, right? But it's very strange, very, very strange. How could Naomi send Ruth to do this really incredulous thing, to go to Boaz in the middle of the night? What's happening here? And I saw a beautiful idea from Rav Schwab that I want to share with you. Rav Schwab says like this, maybe. He He says, maybe Naomi looked back at a previous Yibum opportunity. She looked back to rectify the sin of Yehuda, right? Yehuda and his sons, and Tamar, the two sons die, and Yehuda stops. He can't go further. He can't give his next son, right? And Tamar takes action, and she basically seduces Yehuda to become pregnant, right? And he admits that he at some point, right? I'm just skipping because there's not a lot of time, but at some point Yehuda admits, yes, it was me. I'm the father, right? But there's not really full tshuva with Yehuda, right? And we know the way for there to be complete teshuva, the last stage, is to be in the same position and not do the same thing again. And so Naomi stands up and she says, I'm looking back and I'm looking forward. That's leadership, to use the past to create the future. And she says to Rus, we're looking back to Yehuda. And now is the time to try and see if we can rectify this sin. Because there's a spiritual black cloud over this family, right? When they tell family stories, they say, oh, we can look all the way back to our forefather Yehuda. He was an amazing guy. He was a leader, but he made this mistake. He couldn't control himself. That's our legacy. That's our spiritual DNA in Shevet Yehuda. Naomi says, we can change this. Put Boaz in the exact same situation. And if he controls himself, then the tshuva is complete. And Shevet Yehuda will be absolved of this negative legacy of Yehuda. So Rus goes to the barn in the middle of the night. And it's a challenge for her as well. She wasn't raised to be that kind of woman. And Boaz wakes up in shock, right? Who are you? What's happening? And she tells him. And he says again, and she says to him, remember I told you, like, I'm not like the other maidservants. You have to spread your wings. Don't think of excuses. Figure it out. And he admits, you bring blessing and I will deal with this tomorrow, right? And so how does this connect with Shavuot, this crazy story? And it has to do with the name Shavuos, right? Usually we've translated it as Shavuot, which means weeks. But I want to suggest, again, a deeper understanding. If we read it differently, we can read it as Shavuot, which means oaths, promises. What oaths are there? At Matan Torah, 2 oaths were taken. Hashem swears to be committed to Bnei Israel, and Bnei Israel swear loyalty to Hashem and his Torah. And these oaths, these vows are renewed every year. They're eternal, right? But there's another Shavuah that comes into play here in this story, right? And the idea is that sometimes we're put into, and why we use Shavuah specifically, oaths, when we connect to Hashem. Because sometimes we're put into very difficult situations. We're trying so hard to do the right thing, and it's very, very difficult. Our Yetzer Hara is working overtime, right? And when we're in that situation, I find myself certainly sometimes even mumbling out loud. I'm standing in front of the freezer and I say, I will not eat more ice cream. I will not eat more ice cream. I will not eat more ice cream. And I'm standing in front of the laundry and I say, I will not eat more ice cream. No, because the laundry doesn't, I give myself so many reasons why to eat the ice cream, why not to fold the laundry, why not to give tzedakah, why not to go where I need, all these things, right? But what do I need to do in order to get myself to act sometimes is I need, in this body soul tug of war, is to swear. So nowadays we don't really swear b'shem Hashem, but I do say, I promise myself I'm not going to eat this ice cream. I promise myself I'm going to fold the laundry. I promised myself I was going to, daven properly every morning. I promised myself I was going to give tzedakah every Friday. Whatever it is, we see that we have to, in a way, promise ourselves, because this verbal commitment holds us we hold ourselves to our words, right? And whenever we say, I can't, those I can't become reality. So our I cans are also very strong psychologically. And we see this with Boaz, because Boaz is in such a difficult position. He's almost ready to fail the way Yehuda did. And Boaz swears. He says, Chai Hashem. He says, uses Hashem's name, because with Rus dressed up, lying next to him, seducing him in the darkness, it's not easy. And he swears in the name of Hashem, nothing will happen here tonight. I will deal with it tomorrow, right? And so he teaches us us as Bnei Israel also to swear. Again, today we don't say really B'Shem Hashem, but to make this commitment, to commit to being as moral as we be, to commit to taking responsibility, to fighting temptation, to commit to strive for greatness. And the second Shavuah is that Hashem commits to us to never forsake us, to constantly give us opportunities for growth. So chapter 1, to embrace Hashem, to intellectually and emotionally feel Zman Matan Torasenu. In chapter 2, to put it into action, to give wholeheartedly, to be a new fruit, to renew ourselves, to take on our spiritual opportunities. And in chapter 3, to verbally commit to connecting to Hashem. I know I'm going to be out of time, so I'm going to I don't think there's time really to look at the fourth parak properly. But I want to just look at the last name of Shavuot, and that is Chag HaAtzeret, right? Atzeret means to stop.
Liat,
Yeah.
go ahead with the fourth chapter. Go ahead, show us the fourth chapter. If you
Okay,
don't mind.
I feel bad for anyone who doesn't have time, but okay. So we see what happens the very next day, that Boaz actually does take responsibility, right? The other person, the other man who was supposed to be the Yabam, to do the Yibam, he thinks he's protecting his good name, right? He says, oh, this is not for people like me. But really, in doing this, he becomes Ploni. He becomes Mr. Anonymous, right? And Boaz actually accepts the task on himself, and Rus and Boaz are married. And everybody celebrates, and we hear all the next generations until David HaMelech is born. We end with leadership, that when this message, that when a person steps up, connects to Hashem, and acts within the framework, but acts and does what they need to do for themselves and for Klal Yisrael, we end up with leadership and kingship. But I want to see how that kingship came into play, and we take a step back. And we see that at night in the barn. I take a step back because we want to see how Boaz became the person who does this, okay? At night in the barn, Boaz measures out 6 barleys, okay? And we start to think 6 barleys, is this the old Boaz, like handing out 6 exact, sheaves of barley? And the Midrash says no. The Midrash says Boaz is measuring out for her 6 righteous people that will be born from her, right? What does that mean? 6 righteous people that will be born. So Boaz knows that there will be 6 tzaddikim that will be born from him, from his family. But now he realizes, again, go back to the barn, that it won't be him, that it will be his cousin tomorrow morning. So he symbolically gives the barley to Rus, in essence saying, I see your leadership. I see your greatness. You're not afraid to do what's right, to step up and to speak. So I am giving you the merit to have this offspring, to have these 6 tzaddikim come from you. And the Kabbalists teach us that actually at this moment where he gives over to her the right to have these tzaddikim, he actually earns the right for himself. At that moment, he becomes the miyabim. Why? Because leadership and greatness actually need 2 opposite traits. 2 opposite traits that are going to work in synthesis. Interesting, right? The first trait that a leader needs is a strong will, to not bow under pressure, to not be embarrassed to do what's right, to make decisions, okay? And the second one is humility, to know it's actually all Hashem, okay? Right? It's the famous Kotzk advice to have 2 pieces of paper, 1 in each pocket. In one pocket, Anochi Afar Va'efer, complete humility. And in the other pocket, Et Lasot LaHashem, to know when it's time to do, right? So Bnei Israel, we have Anochi Afar Va'efer completely, but we don't have potential for malchus, for leadership, because our tendency is to all be one, to have achdus. We're all part of one body, right? So one person cannot really be a leader, to be a king over the other person. We're too humble to rule. We're like a human body. You can't have an arm ruling over an ear, right? So we can't rule over each other. And we see that Shaul HaMelech, that's really what happens, is in his feeling of togetherness with the rest of Klal Yisrael, he wasn't able to take a stand. But what we see with Moab, Moab's background is from Lot and his daughter, and they're not ashamed, right? Their name themselves, Me'av, right, is pride. I take pride in it, even when it's wrong. I take responsibility for my actions. So we need this midah in Klal Yisrael, and we bring it from Moab. David HaMelech, part of his makeup is from Rus, right? A king needs to have a bit of pride. And this comes from the spiritual DNA of Rus. So Boaz sees, Rus, she is this leadership. She's the one who takes action. We need Rus to be part of the lineage of Malchus of Klal Yisrael. And he gives her, the barley, significantly, he gives her these 6 tzaddikim. So where does he fit into all of this? And this is what is so beautiful. Boaz, his name, Boaz, the strength is in him. Boaz has no idea if he would marry her, but he is willing to relinquish to her his potential, okay? And in this moment that he says to her, you are the one who needs to have these children, not me. In this moment, we see his absolute altruism, to sacrifice his own desires to be part of the lineage of David HaMelech. He'll be out of the genealogy. The ability to sacrifice his own desires, that is the midah that balances her gevura of being from Moab, right? So what's the trait of Melech HaMashiach? The pride of Rus and the altruism of Boaz, to be willing to give up everything for the cause. And so together we have this synthesis of humility and proactiveness. We need both. So we see that Rus is really, she is the catalyst for Boaz becoming part of the lineage of David HaMelech. And here, this is what I was saying about Atzeret. How we see with Boaz, because usually when we say Chag HaAtzeret, we mean to stop counting, right? Because we've been counting, but on a deeper level, this holiday of Shavuos, of Chag HaAtzeret, celebrates our ability to stop, to hold back, to hold back my own desires. Of course, we always, there's a part of our desires that are true and real, our deepest ratzon, but it's and sometimes it's even our desires for ruchnius, for good. But sometimes we have to give up what I want if it's not what's best, if it's not for the greater good, okay? Even if we think it's holy, even if the Torah says yes, sometimes we have to curb that desire and to just give to be altruistic. And it's so rare that some people even question whether it's possible to be altruistic. But we do see that there are people who hold themselves back with no gain, purely for someone else, right? Purely just for the ruchniistic cause. And Boaz shows this incredible ability to hold back his desire to be part of the line of Mashiach, and he gives it over to Rus. And in that action, he actually genetically modifies the spiritual DNA of kingship. Boaz makes sure that the child is born, and eventually David HaMelech, and eventually Mashiach. And David and Mashiach will have the spiritual DNA necessary to be a king forever, right? David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam, because the genetics are proactive action with humility. With both of these things, leadership comes to the throne. So Shavuot is the day that we embrace greatness, right? To not just be good, but to be great. And we see how in each of the chapters, Rus serves as a mirror to look at ourselves and to question, are we living up to the ideal? Are we striving for greatness? Okay, so I'll sum up now and really to say that we have the different aspects of this yontif by the name. The name is an essence, right? We always say the name of something is its essence. So first we have Zman Matan Toratenu, to embrace Hashem, to accept him intellectually and to embrace him emotionally, the Shekhinah touches us on Shavuos, and to feel that dvekis to Hashem in order to have real chayim. And Chag HaBikurim, we give new offerings of ourselves. We are the Bikurim. We make a commitment to be different, right? To use our spiritual, the ruchnistic opportunities that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us. And we swear, Shavuot, to swear, we make a commitment to Hashem that we will be better, that we will be great. And Hashem responds to us and swears to us to always be with us. And when that happens, we have atzeret. Our own desires are stopped. And we have aseh ritzoncha ritzona. Our desire comes completely to do Hashem's desire. And that's how we bring Mashiach. That's how we bring Mashiach. Where the Torah is given, we embrace Hashem, we accept it, we verbally accept it, and we put our external selves out of the picture in order to connect with other people, in order to connect with Hashem and Torah. And those are the steps that ultimately we each can take to also continue to bring the Geula. Bimhera v'yameinu. Amen.
Wow. So incredibly beautiful. It's so exciting that here we are after the Omer. We're almost near the end, and we're going to take all that we worked on and bring it as a korban, and it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful, everything that you said. I love the line, greatness comes when we feel stable enough to give more of ourselves. How powerful. So thank you so very much. I don't know if we have time for questions. We're already after 9:00. Do you have a moment or two if anyone wants to ask a question?
I do.
Naomi, is that okay if we take a question or two, or we are up with our time? Okay, does anyone have a question?
I just want to say thank you. It was the most beautiful shiur. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you. Maybe she can't hear me.
Yes, you're well. Thank you. It was my pleasure. My absolute pleasure.